I'm like the public comment session to order, and you're going to start with pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Superintendent's report.
Good evening, everyone. I just want to explain the reason I have the mask on. I do it forward. So in abundance of caution, I don't want to get anyone sick, so I do have a N95 mask on. It does kind of take me back to the COVID-19 days. I thought this was done, unfortunately it's not. So the one report that we do have a budget presentation that will be delivered by Ms. Laughlin, Mrs. Official. So at this time, I am going to turn it over to Ms. Laughlin to deliver the budget workshop number 1.
Oh, is that kind of the first place anyway now?
The one on this side.
No, the other one.
Thank you.
Good evening. So we're kicking off our first budget workshop. It is the season for 25-26 budget work. I've been working on the budget since November. The administrative team has been working on it as well with me all through December. So we're now getting into the nitty-gritty line items and kind of honing in as to what we can close out the budget come April. So tonight we're going to kind of just go over where we currently stand in the 24-25 school year, give just a quick mid-year fund balance update to everybody. The projections, sorry, I have a typo there, that is for 25-26 projections. I work in the current year for 1 day a year, so bear with me. Which is including our tax levy, state aid, and our tuition. And then we're going to talk a little bit about our capital reserve and a proposed referendum coming forward. So again, just a brief overview of what is fund balance and how do we project it. Every month, starting around late October, early November, we start projecting on a monthly basis, where is our spending going to land this year? What are we looking at? Our expenses for supplies, equipment, some contractual lines, our tuition. Are they where we thought they were going to be with our budget? Are they coming in under, or are we overspending? Have placements changed with students? Our revenues, are we hitting the target for that? So we kind of I go through literally line by line of the budget on the expense side and the revenue side to figure out our trends, where are we going, to determine, are we going to have surplus funds at the end of the current school year? And if we're not, when do we freeze spending? So we always cut spending off late fall, early winter, depending on where we believe we're going to land. So we've already cut spending off in December, right before the break, so that we can preserve funds for funding up reserves, as well as make sure we remain at our 4% fund balance. So this is just a summary sheet of what the fund balance projection looks like. We're taking a look at our local revenue, which is our tax levy, which is what it is. We ask for the money, we get that money. But some flexibility in the local revenue is our tuition. So our special education, our East Birches, and our Native American tuition, that's all enrollment dependent. Then we have our state aid, which typically we always get what they say we're getting. There's a few changes that happen in there depending on what was our actual spend last year. So once we report in September our actual audited financial numbers, our state aid runs come off based on those actual expenditures for those particular lines. But foundation aid, building aid, those are status quo, and we know what we budget is what we'll get. We are seeing in the area of revenue an increase in our interest earnings due to the interest rates still kind of up there. They are starting to see a decline, but we are seeing a significant increase to what we budgeted. And the other piece is our BOCES refund. So BOCES is not allowed to have a profit. They have to have a break even every year. When they close out their budget, any money that they have that surplus has to get distributed back to their districts based on their spend, their COSERs. This year, BOCES, so we don't budget this revenue because it's actually not a guarantee. Should they break even, you're not getting that money. In past years, we were seeing anywhere from 20,000. Last year, I think it was 96,000 we got back. This year, last week, I reached out to the BOCES and said, hey, are we at that number yet? We're over $300,000 we're getting in BOCES revenue. That was not anticipated. So that's a huge item on our revenue side. That's helpful. So that's why we're starting to see some variances in the local revenue portion. Our tuition is kind of flat based on the 3 categories with enrollment changing. We're not seeing much movement in that area. With regards to our expenses, it's looking at all of our salaries. Did we hire everyone we were going to hire? Did anybody take a leave of absence? Are we not paying people because they have no sick time left? All those things are considered. Our benefits, the big piece here is our health insurance rates. We budget anywhere from 10 to 15% because we only know a half a year rate. So we have to project out what the future is going to be. We looked at this year, our rates for January came in at a 0.2% increase. So we have significant savings in our health insurance line this year as a result of that. Then the other items are equipment monies, our contractual monies. We're kind of looking at hitting the target on those lines. Our tax anticipation note, we do borrow money every year because we don't get our tax revenue until January. So we have to float money to get through payrolls and expenses through December. So we do a TAN borrowing. And our interest that we're paying on it this year happens to be lower than what we anticipated. So that's a good thing. We had to borrow a little bit less money than we've done in the past years, and the interest rates for that area have dropped. So the other piece with salaries, we're seeing salary allocations that we were able to put some grant funds towards. Our sub availability is still low. We're still always looking for subs. So we're using teachers to fill in classes and period coverages, which is could sometimes balance out, but as a result, our preferred sub numbers are down. We have some leave of absences and some position vacancies or things that we look at throughout the salary lines. So all in all, we're at 4.7 million projected right now. These are unaudited numbers, which is important to know. These numbers change on a monthly basis as information is received. We're allowed to have 4% of the subsequent year's budget in our undesignated fund balance. So we don't know what next year's budget is, so we don't know what our 4% is. So any money that is above the 4% is we will typically take and fund our reserves at the end of the year with that money. So now as we get into the 25-26 budget year, right now we're kind of formulating the revenue side of things, property taxes. We're looking at our special education program, our Native American tuition, our East Emergence tuition. We have health services, parentally paced, a lot of miscellaneous revenue categories, and then of course state aid. Being property taxes and state aid are our largest tuition revenue, our largest pieces of revenue, sorry. So what is the tax levy limit? As everybody knows, 2% is not 2%. We did receive the information today that the CPI that will be used in the levy limit is 2%, but there's also categories that go into the formula, which we'll walk through in a few minutes. The final calculation is due to the controller on the 1st of March. The number can change from today. Right now, it's just an estimated number. We don't have all of the information, but we're using what information we have at this time. And then there's exclusions that impact every single district throughout the state, which is why you'll see so many different variables and changes in what everybody's maximum levy limit is. So if we look at the capital exclusions, and I know last year this was asked from the board to kind of go into this a little bit more detail so that everyone has a clear understanding of what is excluded and why. We take a look at what is our capital exclusion. So our debt service payments of $1.4 million for next year is debt that we've already incurred. It's debt that the voters have already approved the district to pay. We have to repay our debt. It's just like you have to pay your mortgage. We have to pay back the money we borrowed for capital projects that have happened in the past. So that's where that number comes from. It's a fixed number. We have no new borrowings. We have the debt service schedules. We know what that amount is. Any new debt that comes on the books would also come off. That $112,000, that is for the EPC project that we just finished out. And then any projected expenses that are going into next year that would get transferred to capital for any capital improvements throughout the district. So this number, you'll see $300,000 right there. In the years past, for the past few years, it's been $100,000 for the capital outlay project. We've been doing $100,000 projects throughout the district. In order to do improvements, you get the aid the following year on that project. What we're looking at this year is proposing to increase that line item to do a larger transfer to start attacking some of those smaller projects a lot quicker. As you know, we were not successful with passing bonds last year. So we're saying, how do we start as a facilities committee, how do we start getting some of these projects tackled in a different way? And this is one way to do it, is you put a transfer to capital, you submit the work to SED, State Education Department, for a permit to do the work, and then you get the aid. It would be fiscally prudent to make sure we make our money work for us, so we want to get the aid on these projects. So we'll continue to do the $100,000 project, which you get the funds in the next year. increase it by another $200,000, which would allow us to get building aid on those projects over the course of 15 years. And the goal would be to continue this practice going forward. It kind of also helps balance out what your tax levy is, and you're not seeing any dips if we can't bring new debt on the books for that. So that's just kind of a, and we'll continue to talk about this and explain this as we go through these presentations so that the community is fully aware of what our plan is. There's no set projects assigned to these monies just yet. At the Health and Safety Committee, we did talk about it, and we are looking at continuing to improve the bathrooms throughout the district. High school and middle school bathrooms have all been done. We're now working with Clayton Huey. We got one bathroom done this year for $400,000. So we do have some smaller bathrooms that we're looking at to see if maybe with $300,000 we can tackle 4 or 5 bathrooms. So the architects are going to be coming in the coming weeks to take a look at that, draw specs, start getting quotes to see if that's something we can do. The other piece of it is BOCE's share of rent and capital expenses. That's a number that BOCE's has obligated, same as us. They rent facilities in order to provide programs for our students, and they also have expenses. They borrow and have debt on their books that all the districts take a share of paying. And as a result, that becomes excluded because we have to pay that part. So that's that small number. BOCE's provides that number to us. We don't, right now, that's the same number that it was last year, so we're waiting on that updated information.
Carrie?
Yes.
The 200,000 that's being proposed for capital work.
Yes.
You said this falls into a different category. We still get the same aid ratio, but it's over 15 years instead of the next year.
Correct.
And that's also separate from a capital reserve funded project.
Correct.
Okay. So, but the financing is basically
We
similar.
listen at Health and Safety Committee.
Yeah. No, it's because I don't remember hearing about that.
Yeah, it's the $100,000 is aidable in the immediate next year. It's a one-time aid, you get that money back. Then the other monies would be spread out over the 15-year cycle of aid. Once you have a permit, you can do the work. So this money also, you can only put in this line any monies you intend to expend in that next year. You could put $1 million in this transfer to capital, but if we're not doing $1 million worth of work next year, you can't exclude it from your levy at all. So let's be reasonable. What is the SED approval? So SED has also just recently re-implemented a third-party review. Current wait times for SED projects is months and months out there. By doing a third-party review, you pay a certain amount to expedite that review, and it's based on the size of your project, is what that cost schedule is. And as a result of that, you can get your permit a lot quicker. They just restarted doing this at the beginning of the school year. In my conversation with my colleague at BOCE's, they happened to be one of the first ones to get it in. They had a permit in 2 weeks. Unheard of. So that is something we, at the Health and Safety Committee, we had talked about, and it is something we would be looking to do in the future to try to get these improvements happening a lot quicker so that we can see this money flow quicker and really just start improving our buildings where we're starting to see some areas of concern. Make sense? So then on the other side is any revenue that we receive with regards to capital. So the building aid that we're getting on that debt that we're paying, we get aid over the 15-year time. So that becomes going netting against the building aid number. So that 962,000. That is the most up-to-date number. I just did reconciliation this morning. That is the most up-to-date number. We don't have state aid runs yet, but based on a reconciliation that we work with BOCE's on, that's what we anticipate receiving next year. Any transfers that we do to the debt service, so we have money, unspent proceeds from prior debt, and any of that money can only be set to pay off your debt. You can't use it for anything else. So we have money sitting in the debt service that we would recommend using some of that to help offset some of that cost. And again, on the same with the BOCE's, you net their costs together. So that number comes from BOCE's. So then when you look at it, this is the full formula. So the formula takes your prior year levy, what is your growth factor? And your growth factor is any new construction that has taken place within your community. That is given to us by the state. Again, we don't come up with that. The allowable growth factor, that is your 2% number based on CPI. That, and then any pilots. So last year we started receiving a very small pilot for the condos that went up on the other side of Sunrise Highway. There is 6 units that belong to the Center Ridge School District. The rest is split between Eastport South Manor and William Floyd School District. But we do have a very small portion of it that is ours, so that's why we are receiving a small pilot on that. So you take that out. And then we put into there what the exclusions are, what is the net of the exclusions in order to come up with our levy limit. So what are the exclusions? So we take what we've just talked about, what is our expenses, net of our revenue, and we come up with that $754,000 is our total exclusion to the levy. That is money that we are required to pay. So you pull that out of your calculation and you put it in there to come up with our total proposed levy of $27 million, which relates to about just over 3% levy limit maximum. Again, this is to be updated before we submit March 1st. We will re-present it again in February when we meet, because this information is based on the information we have today. We're hoping to have state aid runs to confirm that number, as well as we're waiting on the BOCES numbers. The other piece of it is that capital outlay and that $300,000, if that's something we continue to move forward. So now with regards to state aid, what our biggest portion of it is foundation aid. As many of you know, there was a study that was just completed back in December from the Rockefeller Institute that has been given to the state for review. We also have building aid, and then there's BOCES aid. Those are our three biggest categories. We also have high cost aid, which is a number that we file a claim for our high cost students, our students with special needs, and we get revenue back on that cost. Right now, we don't have any numbers. We have a database that was given to us back in November, and it's kind of just holding everything flat. The governor just gave her state of the state on yesterday, and it is anticipated Tuesday of next week that we should have our state aid funds released. We don't know what's happening, what pieces of the foundation study that she will take. We are hopeful that the safe harmless piece that they have put in there and that they recommend keeping remains so that we don't lose any money. But there's so many, there was I think 14 or 16 recommendations in that report that can kind of be cherry picked, but everything kind of relates to each other. So we're waiting to see what happens as a result of that. There was no inclination of what's going to happen based on her, what she presented yesterday. So it's kind of a stay tuned on the state aid portion to see what we're going to get. Tuition, again, 3 different categories. East Mauritius, as you can see, these are the dollar values right in the middle there. We have lost a significant amount of enrollment. Our kind of bubble class is on our way out, and the lower, enrollment is dropping everywhere. We're not seeing as many students come in as we have in the past. This year, we're actually received more students tuitioned in than what we had budgeted. And that happens every year. Some kids come, some kids go. Mid-year, some kids move between the districts or they move out of the district. So there is some of that flexibility. Our special education, you'll see that revenue kind of at a steady for the next year, but we did have a significant decline, and that's just based on need of the students, that whether we couldn't provide the program that they need anymore, or a lot of districts are now starting their own programs. So they've taken their students back in district. And we've also had a lot of students age out. Our own students are also taking up the spots in our program. So we always try to make sure we hold spots for our own students, because we don't want to say, hey, we have to now send somebody to BOCES because we have a tuition student coming in. We do our best to keep our students in-house. And then with Native American tuition, population there is just kind of steady. We're not really seeing any major fluctuation. That revenue is based on a tuition formula that the state derives based on our true expenditures. So we have no say in what that tuition dollar is, and it's a per pupil tuition rate that we get. So as I said before, when we look at total revenue, our property taxes and state aid are our highest amounts, and not knowing right now we're holding state aid flat. When we get numbers next week, we'll update the information and we'll update the community as well as our February presentation. So now to kind of flip over to what are we looking at in the future with capital projects. Talked about adding another $200,000 to start some little projects. The big project in conversation, not just here in the district, but I know in the community, is the auditorium. So we established a capital reserve in May of 2022. A capital reserve is required to be approved by the voters at a certain dollar amount over a certain amount of time, and how it is funded. It is funded right now, ours is funded by any surplus funds. No set value to what we can put into it each year, but there's a limit of $5 million that it can go to. In order to use that money, the voters have to approve us to use it as well. So for 25-26, we're saying, okay, we'd like to renovate the auditorium. Those of you, and I know everybody here, has been in the auditorium, it needs renovation. And we'll get into how we come up with $1 million proposal on the next slide. We're still working on the budget. We're working with a whole bunch of different vendors, kind of piecemealing it. So what we're looking at now is not a complete gut job, which is what was proposed in the bond, but it's giving it a good facelift. It's replacing the guts of it, but not ripping walls out and restructuring the way it looks. And by using the capital reserve, it ends up being no cost to the taxpayers, but they would have to approve it. So this would be a separate referendum on the ballot in May. Literally just looking at carpet tiles today, and it's brought to the board. So what we're looking at,
Karen,
yes,
can I just interject?
Yeah.
On the existing capital reserve fund, is it, I remember correctly that there's also a time limit on it, 5 years?
10 years to fund, no, 10 years.
10 years. to
Yeah.
fund, okay.
Yeah.
So it can sit there for a while.
Right, it can sit. But once it's fully funded, it can still sit until you spend it. You can only
Well,
fund
right,
it up to
obviously, you
that
can't
point.
put in past the extra.
And once you hit that $5 million, you can't put anymore. Even if you spent it down, you've already contributed the full 5. So it would also be recommended to start establishing new capital reserves also.
If we're getting close to 5.
Yeah. So what are we looking at in the auditorium? So as I said, I've been working with numerous vendors, kind of picking their brains. How do we do this? What's the best? We looked at different things for the seats. If we look at that, what can we do to reupholster them? What do we do if we replace them? It's actually cheaper to replace the entire seating system than reupholster them. So it's about $200,000 to do that. The flooring, which is the carpet, the epoxy that the seats sit on, would have to be redone, as well as the stage. Do a nice sand and refinish on the stage. They would put up some nice panels in the front of the stage that would be removable for storage underneath as well. So that's about $132,000. Replace the red curtains. We've replaced the black curtains in the back 2 years ago, but this is to replace those red curtains. It's about $40,000. Our lighting, sound, and painting, that number we're waiting on the quote. We were hoping to have it by today. We haven't received it yet. They're waiting on a few more numbers. And that is adding additional lighting to the pit level. If you've been there for concerts, there's shadows on the students' faces in chorus. You really can't see everybody, so we're looking to add some lighting there. We're having some issues with the sound and our soundboards, and then just give it a good painting job. So now that the seats are out and the carpet is out, let's get up to that ceiling and paint the ceiling. Let's paint the walls. Change out what those red fabric carpet-looking things that are hanging on the wall are supposed to be soundboards. They're not. They're just decorative. We would be looking to do something similar, but a little bit more aesthetic to the area. And then, as I mentioned before, the SED third-party review. This is something the project that we would be looking to utilize in that. So we could not submit a project until it is approved funding by the voters in May. Should that approval go through, we can get a project request up to the state around early June, hopefully have a permit by mid-July, and have the work started in August. So, and I'm working with my vendors saying, hey, if I do this, will you kind of like tentatively hold dates for me? And luckily, good relationships will get you to get that stuff done and kind of have you penciled in on the books. The other is architect fees. So the architects have to do this work. They have a fee based on our contract with them. We're looking at about just under $40,000 for their cost. So that's why our estimated cost right now is $720,000. That is with a high cost of that. We're kind of a number of the 300 for the lighting, sound, and painting. We are asking for the $1 million because, as you know, with any project, and I've stated before, once you start taking things up, you don't know what you're going to find. We're not doing major construction, but we need to give ourselves some contingency there. If we don't use the full $1 million, the remaining funds would go right back into the capital reserve. So we're not looking to spend, if we don't spend it, we're not saying, hey, now we're going to kind of sneak in some other projects. It's going to be solely for the renovations of the auditorium. Again, and these numbers are costs that we're getting right now, and there's escalation that will happen when we actually go out and get the actual costs. These are all based on current contract pricing that exists. And then the project would be aided over 15 years as a capital project.
Carrie?
Yeah.
So let me see if I understand the cash flow here. If it's approved, we put a bond out for the full cost.
No bond.
No bond.
We haven't finished our bond.
Yeah, never mind.
That's why there's no cost to taxpayers. It's the money sitting in the reserve. We're going to pull the money. So we have just over $2 million right now.
So we pays for it in August.
We do.
We do.
The money's sitting in the bank right now.
out of the capital reserve.
Mhm.
So what happens over 15 years?
We get the aid, it becomes revenue into the district, into the general fund.
I thought we still had to borrow money.
No.
No, that's the beautiful part. We're gonna get 78% over 15 years back, but at the same time, we're using our own money. And we're smart, we're using smart money, really. We're not doing it where we're borrowing and having to pay back. We're using our money
Correct.
to get it.
That money's sitting in a bank earning interest right now. So we're looking to say to the community, hey, you said we can start saving the money, we saved it, now we want to use it for a good cause, you know, the hub of the district, and we have it on hand, there's no cost to the taxpayers at this point, and now we'll get revenue as a result of that in 15 years.
So the full cost of the project has to come out of the capital reserve.
Yes.
And we need their approval.
Yes.
Right, well, that's the case,
Yeah.
the community approval is required, right?
But-
Which is why we can't submit the project early to SED, because we need to know that we have the money.
We'd be able to do a presentation of some type, maybe.
We'll continue to expand on this as we're going through budget process. This will be a constant.
Especially once we finalize the lighting and sound of the paving.
Yeah, because we could probably do some type of rendering so people can see what they're looking at,
Yeah.
and then allow some comfort.
And as I said, you know, Health and Safety Committee, we just spoke about it at our meeting 2 weeks ago, last week. Went through it all there. That committee agrees that this is the way we should go about this. So like I said, we have just over 2 million right now in our capital reserve. The way, as I mentioned before, with fund balance, we will be putting, it is anticipated to put more money into that reserve, in upwards of maybe $500,000, if not more, depending on how the rest of the year, you know, pans out. So while we're putting in $500,000, we're going to only take $1 million out. So there's still a gain in capital reserve.
So we'll still be looking at 1.4 roughly on the capital reserves for the future, which is good because it's key.
For future projects. Yep.
And again, the aid ratio is like 0.78.
Right now it's at 7.8, so that does fluctuate.
Right.
So again, right now it's the estimate number that we have. It could change. It does.
It's been trending up, so let's call
Yeah.
it 4-to-1 ratio. So if we had 2 million in there at the end of the year, in principle, that could support $10 million worth of projects.
Over 10 years.
Over-
No, we're only
over
allowed to
15
put
years.
5 million into the capital reserve.
I understand. But we're getting the aid back at a 4-to-1 ratio.
Right, the aid is coming right into general fund, it's not going into the reserve.
So
Yeah.
you can't.
But it helps us
you can't
then
do
have
a big
surplus,
project.
I mean, we budget for that aid because we know what it's gonna be, but then there's potential for surplus to continue to fund that reserve or future reserves.
Mhm.
So again, just a quick budget timeline. Our next budget workshop is February 12th. We'll get more into the expenditure side of the budget with regards to transportation, buildings and grounds, benefits. We'll update on the tax levy. We'll update on state aid as well, and any other new information we have. We will continue to talk about this capital reserve. You'll see it ingrained in everybody's head if you continue to watch these meetings or come to the meetings. Budget workshop 3, March 26th. That's where we'll have our building level plan. Our administrative team will present at that one. And then budget 4, April 23rd, that is to adopt the budget and the property tax report card. May 14th is the annual budget hearing. Any questions from the board?
Thank you for those. Great.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm excited to see that the auditoriums being looked at.
And this will all be available up on the website, and then from Health and Safety as well are on the website, so you can follow along. And Health and Safety Committee is open to the public, so please join us, because that's where a lot of these conversations with regards to capital projects is happening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody else? Any other superintendent?
That's it.
Comments regarding agenda only?
This is the portion of questions and comments from the public. Please note this is the opportunity for persons who wish to speak or have written letters to the Board of Education on topics that are included only in this agenda for the evening. Speakers are asked to sign in with the district clerk prior to approaching the board, which is a book right over on the side. Indicate the topic of comment, keep comments brief, and to speak no longer than 30 minutes. Members of the public will have an opportunity to speak about any topic regarding the board's work at the end of the meeting. So if anyone would like to come forward with a question or comment?
Nope.
So consent agenda approval. Motion to move consent agenda items with the exception of item 12A.
Motion. Second. She wants to do first separate vote.
So, just remove this from,
Correct. Cindy can second.
Discussion? All in favor? Yeah.
Right.
Second. Sorry.
Yes.
Did I say yes?
so this is on the motion to remove the item.
I move.
Motion to move.
To remove
Consent
that.
items,
Yes.
except for, except for 12A.
So everything's approved except.
Lauren, can I take a moment to just welcome
Yes.
Lisa? So I just want to welcome Ms. Lisa Scott to the district. She was just approved by the board. I appreciate your support as the new director of special education. So welcome, Lisa. I think we ran a very great process in terms of trying to find someone. I had a great conversation with Ms. Scott that lasted almost 2 hours. I was very impressed with her experience, passion for students with special needs, and I think she's going to be a great asset. So Lisa, welcome.
Welcome.
Welcome, we're excited to have you, and look forward to seeing what you do this school year. So, motion to vote on item 12A, visualization opt-out as pulled from the consent agenda.
Motion.
Second.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Wait.
No.
Who you want to have discussion? So Marcus wants discussion on call.
I don't, yeah, I'm not gonna have a big discussion. Basically, I've looked into the regionalization a lot. I know the state did this in a way where the rollout was rushed and poorly justified in some cases and left a lot of room for ambiguity. But from what I can see, it still has benefits. It has the potential to open up discussion between districts, and I don't see the drawbacks as being overly realistic. So for that reason, I would support going ahead with regionalization.
Just vote this way.
Yes.
No.
Okay.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Yeah.
General public comment?
And again, hi, general public comments. Members of the public are, who desire to address the board with any topic related to board work, will allow us to do so at this time. Speakers are requested to limit their remarks to not more than 3 minutes. Again, please sign in at the book to the side, and any questions, please approach.
Informational items, there is no school on January 20th, which is Martin Luther King Jr. Day. The PTO and Community Connections meeting is going to be Wednesday, January 22nd at 6 p.m. here in the district office. The Wizards game is on Tuesday, January 28th, so please buy your tickets for that. The next Board of Education meeting and budget workshop number 2 is going to be Wednesday, February 12th at approximately 7 p.m. The location is to be announced. Okay, ready to adjourn the meeting? Motion to adjourn the meeting?
Motion.
Same.
Yes.
Favor? Yes.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.